I am not resisting. This is my home. You have no warrant.
Send backup.
Officer Brandon Wong, badge number 5124 of the Riverside County Police Department, made the worst decision of his 9-year career when he saw a black woman arranging potted plants in an upscale neighborhood and decided something didn't look right. He circled back 15 minutes later, approached the 3-story Victorian with his hand hovering over his taser, and when Megan White answered her own front door, Wong demanded she step outside for questioning without any legal basis. When Megan, a retired Superior Court judge with 18 years on the bench, calmly refused and cited her Fourth Amendment rights, Wong forced his way across the threshold and deployed his taser, sending 50,000 volts through Megan's body while she stood in her own entryway. What Wong didn't know was that the Ring doorbell camera had captured every second in crystal clear HD with perfect audio. That this footage would go viral within 36 hours. That his moment of racial bias would lead to a $7.2 million lawsuit that would cost him everything: his house, his marriage, his children's future. And that 4 years later, his own daughter would discover the one piece of buried evidence that could change the entire story, and wish she had never found it. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. And if you believe no one should be tasered in their own doorway simply for knowing their rights, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Your engagement is how we hold power accountable. The porch boards creaked under Brandon Wong's boots. His right hand hovered 3 inches above the black polymer grip of his taser. The woman in the doorway stood perfectly still, her posture neither defensive nor submissive, her eyes level with his even though he stood 2 steps higher on the Victorian's wraparound porch. The afternoon sun threw long shadows across 1427 Sycamore Lane, and somewhere down the tree-lined street a lawn sprinkler hissed in steady rotations. Wong ordered her to step outside, his voice flat and rehearsed. Megan White tilted her head slightly. She wore jeans and a faded Howard University sweatshirt, dirt still visible under her fingernails from the planters she had been arranging along the front walkway. She asked him for what reason. Wong didn't answer immediately. His eyes swept past her into the foyer: hardwood floors, a crystal chandelier, framed photographs on cream-colored walls. He told her he needed to verify she belonged in the residence. 15 minutes earlier, Wong had been cruising south on Sycamore when he first noticed her. The neighborhood didn't get much foot traffic, and it definitely didn't see many black residents working their own front yards at 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday. Elmwood Heights was old money: tech executives, surgeons, a couple of retired state senators. The houses here started at $1.8 million and climbed fast. Wong had slowed his patrol car to 15 miles per hour, watched her crouch beside a bag of mulch, arrange 3 potted ferns along the porch railing, wipe her hands on her jeans. Something felt off. Not illegal, exactly. Just off. He had driven to the end of the block, made a U-turn at the cul-de-sac, and come back. Now Megan studied the badge clipped to his uniform. She informed him this was her home, that she had purchased it 3 weeks ago. She offered to retrieve her identification and the property deed from inside if he wished to see them. Wong's jaw tightened. He had been a cop for 9 years. He knew what reasonable suspicion looked like, and he knew what it felt like when someone was stalling. He repeated his demand that she step outside. Megan's voice remained calm, almost conversational. She explained that under the Fourth Amendment, she was not required to comply with that request unless he had probable cause or a warrant. She asked if he had either. The question hung in the air between them. Wong felt heat creep up the back of his neck. His left hand drifted to his radio, then stopped. He glanced up at the small white dome mounted above the doorframe. Ring doorbell, lens pointed directly at his face. He had seen a dozen of these cameras on this street alone. Half the department had them on their own houses. Wong's voice hardened. He warned her this was her last chance, ordering her to step outside now or he would remove her by force. Megan took a single breath, her shoulders rising and falling. She stated clearly that she was the lawful owner of the property, that she was not suspected of any crime, that he had no warrant, no exigent circumstances, and no probable cause. She asserted her Fourth Amendment right to be secure in her home against unreasonable search or seizure. Wong's hand closed around the taser grip. Everything that happened next took 11 seconds. Wong drew the weapon, flicked off the safety with his thumb, and shouted a countdown that Megan never acknowledged. 3, 2, 1. He stepped across the threshold, one boot, then the other, moving from public porch into private foyer without invitation or authority. Megan raised both palms in a gesture that was neither resistance nor surrender, her mouth forming words that would later be transcribed from the ring footage with perfect clarity. She repeated that she was not resisting, that this was her home, that he had no warrant. Wong fired. The twin probes struck Megan in the center of her chest. 50,000 volts surged through the wires in 5-second bursts, controlled by Wong's finger on the trigger. Megan's body convulsed, knees buckling, arms jerking rigid, and she collapsed backward onto the hardwood floor of her own entryway. The muscles in her jaw locked. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The probes stayed embedded in the fabric of her sweatshirt, wires trailing back to the yellow plastic device in Wong's hand. From somewhere deeper in the house came a shout. Footsteps pounded down a hallway. Jordan appeared in the archway that led to the kitchen, eyes wide, phone already in his hand. He screamed something indistinct, dropped to his knees beside Megan, and then looked up at Wong with an expression that mixed horror and fury and disbelief. Wong didn't holster the taser. He moved forward, grabbed Megan's right wrist, twisted it behind her back, and snapped a steel cuff around it even though her body was still twitching from the residual current. He pulled her other arm back, completed the restraint, and then keyed his radio. He reported that the suspect was secured and requested backup at 1427 Sycamore Lane, citing possible trespassing and resistance to lawful commands. Megan's voice, hoarse and strained, came from where her cheek pressed against the floor. She insisted she was not resisting, that this was her home, that he had no warrant. Backup arrived in 4 minutes. Lieutenant Elena Vargas was first through the door, followed by 2 patrol officers Wong recognized from shift change. Vargas took 3 steps into the foyer and stopped. Her eyes moved from Wong to the woman handcuffed face down on the floor, to the taser probes still embedded in her chest, to the walls lined with framed commendations and family photographs, to Jordan kneeling beside Megan with his phone held out like evidence. Vargas spoke quietly, her voice tight. She demanded an explanation immediately. Wong started to answer, but Jordan cut him off. He turned the phone screen toward Vargas. She stepped closer, squinted at the display, and watched the ring footage play from the beginning. 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Every word. Every threat. The illegal entry. The tossing. All of it captured in 1080p resolution with time-stamped metadata. When the video ended, Vargas looked at Megan. She knelt, careful not to touch the probes, and spoke directly to her. She asked for her name. Megan's answer came slowly, each word deliberate. She identified herself as Megan White, a retired Superior Court judge who had served 18 years on the bench in this county. She stated this was her home, that she had purchased it legally, and that she had committed no crime. The foyer went silent except for the faint hum of the central air conditioning. One of the patrol officers behind Vargas shifted his weight, the leather of his duty belt creaking. Vargas stood, turned to Wong, and spoke in a voice that carried no emotion at all. She ordered him to say nothing, not to speak, not to move, not to touch anything. She keyed her radio and requested the chief of police directly. Above the doorframe, the ring camera's small red recording light blinked steadily, capturing every second of the aftermath just as it had captured every second of the crime. The Riverside County Police Department opened an internal investigation within 3 hours of Lieutenant Vargas's call. By sunrise the next morning, Brandon Wong had been placed on administrative leave without pay. His badge and service weapon surrendered to the duty sergeant who processed him out through the back entrance of the precinct. Wong signed the acknowledgement forms without reading them, drove home in silence, and found his wife standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed and the television tuned to the local news. The department's press release went live at noon. It contained 43 words, all of them carefully vetted by legal counsel, acknowledging awareness of an incident involving one of their officers and a community member, stating the matter was under active internal review, and expressing commitment to transparency and accountability with no further comment at that time. Megan White released the ring footage herself the following afternoon. She had spent the morning with her attorney, a civil rights specialist named Claudia Reeves, who had handled 3 excessive force cases in the past 2 years. Reeves uploaded the 4-minute 37-second clip to YouTube at 2:47 p.m. on Sunday. She tweeted the link with a single sentence noting that retired Judge Megan White had been tasered in her own home for knowing her rights. The video reached 10,000 views in the first hour. By midnight it had climbed past 400,000. Monday morning news programs picked it up during their second segment blocks, splicing Wong's commands and Megan's calm legal citations into 15-second loops that played between anchor commentary. By Tuesday evening the clip had surpassed 12 million views across all platforms. The footage looped endlessly. Wong's voice, flat and escalating. Megan's measured refusal. The step across the threshold. The tossing. Her body convulsing on the floor. The probes visible against the dark fabric of her sweatshirt. Cable news panels dissected the Fourth Amendment. Legal experts outlined the standards for probable cause. Former police chiefs called the entry indefensible. Civil rights activists pointed out what the department already knew: Megan White had done everything right, and it hadn't mattered. The view count continued to climb. 15 million. 18 million. 22 million. If you believe no one should be forced from their own doorway for simply knowing their rights, drop a quick accountability in the comments and share this video with one person who still thinks this kind of thing only happens somewhere else. The department's Internal Affairs Division pulled Wong's personnel file on Wednesday morning. What they found confirmed what Lieutenant Vargas had suspected the moment she saw the ring footage. Brandon Wong had accumulated 11 citizen complaints over 9 years of service. 9 of those complaints involved interactions with minority residents. 6 alleged excessive force. 2 had resulted in written reprimands. 1 had required Wong to complete a 4-hour de-escalation training module. None had led to suspension or demotion. The pattern sat there in black and white, documented and ignored across nearly a decade. Lieutenant Vargas's incident report was delivered to the chief's desk on Thursday. She had written it in the clipped, procedural language of someone who understood that every word would eventually be read in a courtroom. The report noted no call for service, no complaint from any resident, no reported crime, and no exigent circumstances. It stated that Officer Wong had initiated contact based solely on his observation of a black woman performing yard work in an upscale neighborhood, and that when the homeowner asserted constitutional protections, Officer Wong forced entry and deployed a conducted energy weapon without legal justification. The report included a still frame from the ring footage, Wong's boot crossing the threshold, Megan's hands raised, her mouth open mid-sentence. On Friday morning, Megan White and Jordan sat across a conference table from Claudia Reeves and 2 partners from her firm. The lawsuit they drafted named both the Riverside County Police Department and Officer Brandon Wong individually. The demand was $7.2 million, $4.5 million from the department for systemic failure and inadequate oversight, $2.7 million from Wong personally for assault, battery, false imprisonment, and violation of civil rights under color of law. The figure made headlines before the close of business. That same evening, 15-year-old Lily Wong sat at the kitchen table with her phone propped against a water glass, watching the viral clip for the 7th time. Her father sat across from her, staring at his hands. Her mother moved between the stove and the sink, saying nothing. Dinner plates remained stacked in the cabinet. No one had eaten. Lily pressed pause at the moment the taser fired. She looked up at her father. The man who had coached her soccer team until she was 12. The man who had taught her to drive in empty parking lots on Sunday mornings. The man whose uniform had always represented safety and order and rules that made sense. She stood without speaking, walked to her room, and closed the door. The silence she left behind was the beginning of an estrangement that would outlast the lawsuit, the conviction, and the years that followed. Across town, Megan sat on the couch beside Jordan, her hand resting on his knee. The probes had left 2 small marks on her chest, faint circles that would fade in a month. The physical injury was minor. The violation was permanent. She spoke quietly, almost to herself, saying this had to mean something, that it couldn't just be what happened to her. Jordan nodded and asked what she wanted to do. Megan stared at the dark television screen, her own reflection faint in the glass. She said she wanted to make sure it was harder for this to happen to someone else, that she wanted officers to see this footage in training, that she wanted departments to understand that cameras don't lie, and that rights don't disappear just because someone assumes you don't belong. In his rented apartment on the east side of the county, Brandon Wong sat alone in the dark. The footage had already ended his career. He understood that much. What he didn't yet understand was how thoroughly it would end everything else. The Ring camera's blinking red light had captured the truth. And the truth, once released, could not be recalled. 7 months after the doorway, the Riverside County Police Department settled its portion of the lawsuit for $4.5 million. The agreement included no admission of wrongdoing, a commitment to revised use of force training, and a clause prohibiting both parties from disparaging the other in public statements. Megan White's attorneys accepted the terms after a 14-hour negotiation session that ended at 2 in the morning. The department's insurance carrier cut the check within 10 business days. Brandon Wong's portion remained unresolved. Claudia Reeves filed a separate motion to pierce the qualified immunity doctrine that typically shields individual officers from personal liability. She argued that Wong's actions were so egregious, so clearly outside the scope of lawful police conduct, that he should bear direct financial responsibility for the $2.7 million balance. The judge assigned to the case reviewed the Ring footage twice during the preliminary hearing. He granted the motion without requesting additional briefs. Wong's assets were modest. He and his wife owned a 3-bedroom ranch-style house in a subdivision built in the 1990s, purchased 12 years earlier for $340,000 and now valued at $425,000 after refinancing. They carried $38,000 in combined retirement accounts. Their joint savings held $14,200. Wong's personal checking account showed a balance of $1,847. His wife's Subaru Outback had 3 years remaining on the loan, the title held jointly. The children's college fund, started when Lily was born, contained $31,500 in a 529 plan. The court ordered all of it seized. The house went to auction on a Thursday morning in March. A real estate investor purchased it for $389,000, 20% below market value. After the mortgage payoff and legal fees, the proceeds contributed $63,000 toward the judgment. The retirement accounts were liquidated in full. The Subaru was repossessed from the driveway on a Tuesday while Wong's wife was inside packing boxes. The savings and checking accounts were drained by automatic transfer. The college fund was frozen, then diverted. Wong's wife filed for divorce 9 months into the financial collapse. The petition cited irreconcilable differences. She was awarded primary custody of Lily and her younger brother. Wong was granted supervised visitation every other weekend, contingent on maintaining child support payments that the court calculated based on his projected future earnings, not his current unemployment. The criminal trial began 4 months after the civil settlement. The prosecution presented the Ring footage on the first day. They played it 3 times for the jury, once in full, once with pauses to highlight specific constitutional violations, and once with an audio expert's testimony about the clarity of Megan's repeated assertions that she was not resisting. The defense argued that Wong had acted on training and instinct, that split-second decisions in the field cannot be judged with the clarity of hindsight, that his intent was to ensure public safety rather than to harm. The jury deliberated for 6 hours across 2 days. They convicted Wong on 3 counts: assault, battery, and unlawful entry. The judge scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later. Wong stood before the bench in a suit borrowed from his attorney. The courtroom was half full, journalists in the back rows, Megan White seated beside Claudia Reeves in the third row. The judge read the sentence without preamble: 20 months in county jail, 3 years supervised probation upon release, permanent prohibition from employment in law enforcement, or any position requiring a firearm, and restitution of $2.7 million to be paid through wage garnishment for the duration of his natural life. Wong served 16 months. He was released on a Wednesday in November, processed out through the same administrative building where he had once reported for duty. He wore the jeans and flannel shirt his ex-wife had dropped off in a plastic bag the week before. No one was waiting for him in the parking lot. He found work at a car wash on the commercial strip near the county line. The job paid $13.50 an hour, 40 hours a week when the weather was good, 30 when it rained. The first paycheck arrived via direct deposit. 70% was immediately garnished under the court order. Wong received $162 for 2 weeks of labor. He rented a studio apartment in a complex that didn't run background checks, 400 square feet with a kitchenette and a bathroom where the shower dripped rust-colored water for the first 30 seconds. Lily turned 16 the month her father was released. She refused all contact. She stopped using his last name on school enrollment forms, substituting her mother's maiden name instead. When the supervised visitation schedule resumed, she attended exactly once, sat in silence across a table in a family services office for 45 minutes, and then told the mediator she would not return. Wong did not contest her decision. He worked the car wash 6 days a week. The same hands that had once gripped a badge and a taser now gripped a squeegee and a spray nozzle. He scrubbed tire wells, wiped down door panels, vacuumed floor mats. His coworkers knew his story, everyone did, but they never mentioned it. He clocked in, worked his shift, clocked out, went home to the studio, microwaved something frozen, and slept. The garnishment letters arrived every month, summarizing the balance owed, $2,700,000 principal, accruing interest at 4.5% annually. At his current income and garnishment rate, the debt would outlive him by an estimated 43 years. 300 miles north, Megan White stood at a podium in a hotel conference room addressing 200 police officers enrolled in a regional training seminar. Behind her, a projection screen displayed the ring footage, paused at the moment Wong's boot crossed her threshold. She spoke without notes, her voice steady and practiced, explaining that this moment represented a failure that began long before the officer arrived at the door, that it began with assumptions and patterns of who belongs and who doesn't, that it began when complaint files were filed away instead of addressed. She emphasized that cameras don't prevent these encounters. Training prevents them, accountability prevents them. She had launched the foundation 6 months after the settlement, using a portion of the award to fund a nonprofit focused on use of force reform and implicit bias training. She partnered with departments across the state, presented at national conferences, consulted with legislators drafting body camera accountability bills. The ring footage became the centerpiece of her presentations, not as spectacle, but as evidence that the system could be forced to respond when the proof was undeniable. The foundation operated out of a small office in a renovated warehouse near downtown. 3 full-time staff members, 2 part-time interns, filing cabinets filled with case studies and policy drafts. Megan worked 60-hour weeks, traveled constantly, answered emails at midnight. The work filled the space where the violation had been. Back at the car wash, Brandon Wong wiped down a windshield with broad, methodical strokes. The glass gleamed under the afternoon sun. The customer tipped $2. Wong folded the bills into his front pocket and moved to the next car in line, the squeegee dripping soapy water onto the asphalt. The same hands. Different work. The same life, collapsed into something unrecognizable. Hundreds of miles away, Megan advanced to the next slide. For years after the doorway, Lily Wong enrolled as a criminal justice major at the State University 2 hours from where she grew up. She chose the program deliberately, studied constitutional law and police procedure, and the history of civil rights enforcement with the focus of someone trying to decode a language she had once thought she understood. She had not spoken to her father since the supervised visitation session when she was 16. She did not know where he lived. She did not ask. In the spring semester of her junior year, Lily applied for an internship with the Police Accountability and Reform Foundation. The application required a personal statement. She wrote 3 drafts before submitting one that focused on her belief that systemic change required understanding how individuals fail within broken structures. She did not mention her last name was Wong. She did not mention her father. The foundation accepted her in April. She started in May, working 10 hours a week filing case studies, updating databases, organizing materials for Megan White's speaking engagements. The office was small, tucked into the second floor of a converted warehouse with exposed ductwork and tall windows that overlooked a parking lot. Megan was often traveling, but when she was in the office she treated the interns with the same patient attention she had once given to courtroom arguments, asking questions, listening carefully, correcting gently. Lily introduced herself as Lily Brennan, her mother's maiden name. No one asked for clarification. Over the summer she became a familiar presence in the foundation's routine. She digitized old files, cross-referenced case numbers, helped prepare presentation slides. Megan learned her coffee order. The staff invited her to Friday lunches. By August, Lily had keys to the office and permission to work after hours when she needed quiet space to study. On a Wednesday night in late September, Lily sat alone at the desk near the back filing cabinets. It was nearly 2 a.m. She had finished her assigned tasks an hour earlier but stayed to review materials for an upcoming training session. The office was silent except for the hum of the computer and the occasional creak of the building settling. She opened a mislabeled folder while searching for a reference document. The tab read, 2019, Training Materials. But the contents were video files, not PDFs. She clicked the first file. The screen filled with body camera footage, the timestamp in the corner reading 4 years earlier. The perspective was first person, jostling slightly as the wearer moved. Dispatch audio crackled over the speakers. The dispatcher directed Unit 5124 to respond to 1427 Sycamore Lane, Elmwood Heights, reporting a suspicious person attempting entry to the residence. The caller had reported a black female, late 40s to early 50s, tampering with the front door, stating she did not recognize the individual and believed the residence was unoccupied. Lily froze. The address was exact. The timestamp matched. This was her father's body camera. This was footage from the day. The video continued. Wong's voice acknowledged the call. The camera showed the steering wheel of the patrol car, the dashboard GPS, the turn onto Sycamore Lane. It showed Megan White kneeling beside a planter, arranging ferns. It showed Wong circling the block, parking 3 houses down, approaching the porch. It showed everything the Ring camera had shown, but from the opposite angle, and it started with the dispatch call that proved Wong had not initiated contact on his own assumption. Someone had called 911. Someone had reported Megan as suspicious. Someone had weaponized the police response. Lily scrolled through the folder. The second file was the dispatch log. Caller name, Vanessa Hargrove. Address, 1431 Sycamore Lane. The house directly next door. The call had been logged, recorded, and filed. The third file was a follow-up report dated 2 days after the incident. It noted that Mrs. Hargrove had been contacted by phone and declined to provide a statement. No further action recommended. Case closed. Lily stared at the screen. Vanessa Hargrove had lied. She had seen a black woman at the neighboring house, assumed criminality, and called 911 with a false report of forced entry. Wong had responded to that call. The Ring footage that went viral, the lawsuit, the conviction, the total destruction of his life, all of it had been built on the foundation of a neighbor's deliberate racism. And the department had buried the dispatch audio within 48 hours, never corrected the public narrative, never charged Hargrove, never even interviewed her beyond a single phone call she refused. Lily played the bodycam footage again. The dispatch call was clear. The address was specific. Wong had been sent to that house. He had still made the choice to force entry, to ignore Megan's constitutional objections, to deploy the taser. But the viral story that had destroyed him was incomplete. The real villain, or at least the initial one, had never been named. She sat back in the chair. The Foundation's mission statement hung framed on the wall across from her, declaring truth, accountability, and systemic reform through evidence and education. This was evidence. This was truth. But it was also a complication the movement didn't need. The simple narrative, racist cop brutalizes judge in her own home, had driven legislation, changed training protocols, forced departments to adopt stricter oversight. The story had worked because it was clean. Adding the neighbor's false 911 call would muddy that clarity. It would shift focus. It would allow people to say the officer was just doing his job, just responding to a call, just a victim of bad information. Lily's father had still committed the crime. He had still ignored the law. But he had not been the only one who failed that day, and he had been the only one who paid. She looked at the file path on the screen. The folder was mislabeled and buried 3 layers deep in the archive. No one had accessed it in years. She could delete it. One click. The Foundation's work could continue uninterrupted. The narrative that had already changed policy could remain intact. Her father would stay the villain, but the cause would stay strong. Or she could copy the files to a drive, walk them to Claudia Reeves's office, and watch the story rewrite itself. The neighbor would face scrutiny. The department's cover-up would be exposed. Her father's culpability would be contextualized, if not erased. And the clean, powerful story of unchecked police racism would fracture into something more complicated and harder to use. Lily's hand hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked in the center of the screen. The frozen image of her father on the porch stared back at her, his face partially visible in the bodycam frame, his hand reaching for the taser. She had not spoken to him in 4 years. She had rebuilt her life around the absence of him. She had chosen this internship specifically to understand the system that had produced his failure. And now she held the evidence that could shift the weight of blame, redistribute the consequences, and complicate the justice she had spent years learning to believe in. The office was silent. The building was silent. Outside, the parking lot lights cast long yellow rectangles across the asphalt. Lily's finger trembled above the delete key. The decision, whatever it would be, would never appear on any camera.